Camilo. Thank you, everybody that is joining us live now, and the other ones that are also watching the recorded video. Today, we are starting our first lecture of our permanent forum of Project City and Process. It is an initiative of the post-graduation program, Project City, from the university, the Federal University of Goiás, and the Project Process Labs from the Faculty of Visual Arts. And it's also in partnership with the journal Jatobá. You can find the links in the description of the video. The post-graduation program and especially this forum aims to discuss the processes of project and the city itself as a process. Today we will have a brief opening of the forum because it's the first event, and a lecture, and later a question and answers section in the end. So please share your comments and the questions on the live chats so we can collect them and discuss after the lecture. Please identify your institution or the city where you're speaking from, so we can have a reference on that. For those wishing to have a certificate of this of watching this lecture online live, you can fill a Google form that is in the description, and we're gonna put also in the live chat. So my name is Camilo, and I will be sharing this session. I'm a professor at the Federal University of Goiás. Initially, I would like to call to this table our guests, and I would like gladly to welcome in our Professor Braulio Vinicius. He is the head of the Visual Arts faculty. He will speak in Portuguese, but later we're gonna put also the subtitles for you. And please be warmly welcome. I would like also to call Professor Ernesto Amaral, who is from the Texas A&M University, who will be delivering the lecture today. So thank you very much for accepting our invitation and for joining us here. I should also, right from the start, just thank everybody that's working on the backstage. So especially our students for the graduate program. There is Maria Mello, Marília Rezende, Luisa Dyer, Kairene, Renato, and Wilder and Katia, who are the technicians. For making, they are responsible for making this event possible. And despite of all the difficulties we are having with the COVID pandemic and all these remote problems, I would like also to share initially some solidarity with the families that was affected by the COVID pandemics, and share words of encouragement for those who are caring for the sick and those who were affected by it. So I will now briefly just talk a little bit about what is the permanent forum and what's this idea. It started, actually, the Permanent Forum started in 2011 and had many different formats, so it was a continuous effort. But this year we went virtual and global, so it's entering a new dimension. And so we are trying to explore this situation so we can maximize the impact that we can have with the lectures that usually happen inside our postgraduate program. This new forum of Project City and Processes will have live events, a website that will be on hopefully in the next year, and also virtual exhibitions of especially about the design-based research. The live events will run on Wednesday. This month of November will run every Wednesday and Friday. So please find the information on the description and on the links and on the social medias of FAV and the UFG. But it will continue for the next years, and our idea is to do at least one event a month. This forum It's about discussing the different processes of projecting and analyzing the city, but also how we can think about the city itself as a process. So it focuses on critical ways of thinking the city and the possible and impossible ways to intervene on it. In other words, how to think and transform the cities for the complex challenges that we are facing today. And I could say these challenges, they include a many series of crises, which are economic crisis, political crisis, ecological crisis, humanitarian crisis, and also our latest crisis, that is a sanitary crisis. But it aims to discuss this, how we can do this process of change and our necessary ecological transition. So now I would like to pass the word to the head of department, Braulio Vinicius, so he can speak on behalf of the Faculty of Visual Arts of the Federal University of Goiás.
Thank you, Camilo, but my English is very limited, and so my speaks for just thank you and welcome, ok? Muito bem, Camilo, olha, sejam todos bem-vindos e bem-vindas. É com muita alegria que a Faculdade de Artes Visuais recebe mais um evento, e um evento com uma característica importante para a universidade, para a Faculdade de Artes Visuais, na promoção e na integração da internacionalização dos nossos eventos, das nossas atividades, e é com essa alegria, com uma semana, né, numa semana de celebração para a nossa faculdade, em que completamos 60 anos da inauguração da nossa escola, da nossa faculdade, uma faculdade criada numa década muito difícil e que comemora 60 anos também num período muito complicado e muito difícil. Desculpem. Que comemora 60 anos num período muito complicado e muito difícil para o Brasil e também para o mundo, né? Nós vivemos um contexto de uma pandemia, no Brasil com mais de 60 mil mortos, pessoas que perderam suas vidas, famílias e entes queridos que estão hoje enlutados, muito em função, né, da irresponsabilidade e da forma com que o nosso governo tem tratado esses assuntos, os assuntos que dizem respeito à saúde pública brasileira. Enfim, a pandemia também nos exige e nos promove a esse tipo de atividade, né, que é atividade à distância, e é possível, né, de alguma forma, aprender com todo esse processo, e um dos aprendizados é a maneira como a gente está desenvolvendo e elaborando os nossos eventos. Então, quero agradecer a organização de todo o fórum, de todo o evento, ao Camilo, que organizou e que agora em missão, né, numa missão internacional, fruto de um outro trabalho também internacional que ele desenvolveu, agora pretende, né, ampliar as ações junto a outras instituições de nível superior do mundo. Quero agradecer à organização do evento pelo Camilo e também por toda a equipe, aos estudantes do programa de pós-graduação Projetoecidade, a Marília, a Luísa, aos nossos técnicos administrativos, Renato e o Wilder, que estão aí nos bastidores, e também dar as boas-vindas em nome da Faculdade de Artes Visuais e da UFG ao Ernesto Amaral, que é egresso da UFG, foi nosso aluno das Ciências Sociais, e quero também agradecer a participação dele, aí ele em outro país, Camilo na Europa, na Itália, Ernesto nos Estados Unidos, e nós aqui no Brasil, em Goiânia. A Faculdade de Artes Visuais, como bem falei, completa 60 anos, com uma comunidade de estudantes, né, com mais de 1.500 estudantes, dentre graduandos, especializandos, mestrandos e doutorandos. É uma unidade que tem 6 cursos de graduação, artes visuais, na modalidade à distância e presencial para a licenciatura, artes visuais bacharelado, a arquitetura e urbanismo, nosso curso mais recente da Faculdade de Artes Visuais, com apenas 10 anos, design de moda, design gráfico e design de ambientes. São esses os cursos de graduação, estruturados, né, de uma forma que atenda, né, esse público e essas demandas que a sociedade nos coloca. Somos mais de 77 professores, somos mais de 20 técnicos administrativos servidores, somos quase uma dezena de terceirizados nos ajudando ali na segurança e na limpeza do edifício, e é em nome dessa comunidade, em nome de todas essas pessoas cuja missão não interessa, né, a atividade que a gente faça, se é na sala de aula, se são nos ateliês, se são atividades vinculadas ao protocolo administrativo e acadêmico, ou se são atividades também destinadas à manutenção do nosso edifício, à limpeza e à segurança. Todos nós temos como missão formar as pessoas, capacitá-las para transformar um mundo e uma sociedade desigual, injusta, e é nessa possibilidade que nós acreditamos, é essa possibilidade de transformação de mundo e de cenário que nos motiva a sermos UFG, a sermos Faculdade de Artes Visuais. Então, quero dar as boas-vindas a todos e a todas e desejar um excelente evento, parabenizando aí a todos os envolvidos e tenham todos um bom dia e uma boa palestra, uma boa participação no nosso evento. Obrigado, Camilo, obrigado, Ernesto.
So now I thank you, Braulio, for your presentation of our department and your considerations. I will now just introduce the speaker today. Ernesto Amaral is, as Braulio mentioned, is a former alumni of the Federal University of Goiás, where he studied social sciences. Later, he did a master in research in demography at the Center for Regional Planning and Development, which is known as CEDEPLAR at UFMG, in the Faculty of Economics. And later he did a PhD in sociology at the University of Texas in Austin. So he has there like a interdisciplinary formation. He worked at the João Pinheiro Foundation from 2008 and 2009, researching on the evaluation of public policies. Later, he was a professor at the Federal University of Minas Gerais, teaching both in the graduate school in political science and in the undergraduate program on public administration. There he also was the coordinator of the Social Science Methodology Laboratory. He also worked, after that, he moved to US, where he worked at the RAND Corporation as an associate sociologist. The RAND Corporation is a non-profit think tank that focused on research to help governments to make decisions. And maybe is one of the first think tanks and the most prestigious in the world. And later now, he's a professor at the Department of Sociology at Texas A&M University, where his research interests are focused on social demography, migration, and public policy analysis. His teaching interests also include demography and migration, methods and social statistics, and public policy analysis. So we very much welcome you here back at UFG. So also like creating this link forward and backward international link, and we are happy that you accepted to share your research. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of things to learn from your interdisciplinary perspective and to help us with the challenge that the forum is proposing. So today he will speak about spatial methodologies for visualizing social inequalities in metropolitan areas, taking the case study of the metropolitan region of Guyana and showing us how we can process information to better visualize these social inequalities. He will present the lecture that's about 50 minutes, and then you can deliver your, if anybody on the audience wants to make a question or a commentary, please put in the live chat that we will collect them and make these questions in the end of his presentation. Now, with no more delays, I will pass we usually say the floor, but here the screen to Ernesto so he can deliver the lecture. Thank you, Professor Ernesto.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Camilo Amaral, for the invitation, for the possibility to share this study here with an audience from the Federal University of Goiás. So it's my pleasure to talk to people at UFG, where I studied social sciences, as Professor Camilo mentioned. And I also like to thank Professor Braulio Vinicius for the introduction, and also thank everybody else who is organizing this forum and is making everything really smooth on my end here. So I really appreciate the invitation and thank you very much for this opportunity. So I will start my presentation. As Professor Camilo Amaral mentioned, I will talk about spatial methodologies for visualizing social inequalities in metropolitan areas. All this, I mean, the forum is recording this lecture and it's going to be available online, but if afterwards you just want to have a copy of this presentation, it's going to be available in my website as well. So, and the way that I organized the talk today, I will just give you what's the main objective with this research, what was the main motivation that made us start doing this research, which database we are using for this analysis, which methods we are going to use. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Moran's eye and also about the local indicator of spatial association, which, like LISA, the local indicator of spatial association, is the main methodology that I'm using here for this analysis. And then show you the main results, a summary diagram in which we try to combine our results in a single diagram. Then give you some final considerations about the main results that we found and some possibilities for future research. So they are here, we want to, I mean, it's a methodological talk, but also apply to a specific issue. So I want to discuss spatial methodologies to better visualize socioeconomic inequalities within metropolitan areas. So these methodologies that I'm going to talk here today, it's going to be specific to the case of the metropolitan region of Goiânia, but it can be used for any metropolitan area. So if you want to do comparison with other metropolitan areas within Brazil or with other countries, all these methods can be used there as well. And these methods that I'm going to use here to better visualize these inequalities, they go beyond traditional measures of inequality. So usually traditional measures of inequality, they do not allow this kind of more in-depth visualization of socioeconomic inequalities. And so we apply this methodology to investigate the complex structure of segregation in the metropolitan region of Goiânia. And here I'm going to refer it to RMG. And so why I started thinking about this, I mean, I'm from Goiânia, I studied in Goiânia, I live in Goiânia most of my life. But back when I was in my postdoc at UFMG, the United Nations published some reports about the state of the world cities generated. The United Nations reports about the state of the world cities generated reactions from Brazilian politicians. And why it generated these reactions? Pretty much these studies by the UN indicated really high levels of economic inequality in several Brazilian cities. So at that time, the UN published these reports and showing that Brazilian cities had really high levels of inequality, and so Brazilian politicians didn't really like that and pushed back against it. So politicians did not take advantage of this debate to better understand inequality and segregation, instead of actually going further and trying to understand why those indicators were showing so high inequality in Brazilian cities. They just pushed back against the UN report, and they did not take advantage of that moment to go more in depth on this debate. And if they had taken advantage of this opportunity, this would have been much more helpful to implement adequate public policies for urban planning. So what exactly this report showed? So the first one of them was the states of the world cities in 2008 and 2009. And these reports here, they're available online if you want to download them. And the links to these reports, I posted them at the end of my lecture here today. And what this one here talked specific about Brazilian cities was that amongst 19 cities analyzed in Latin America and the Caribbean, these cities here had really extremely high inequality. So Goiânia, Brasília, Belo Horizonte, Fortaleza, São Paulo, and actually Bogotá as well, had Gini coefficient above 0.6. So all these Brazilian cities and also Bogotá had really high levels of inequality. And just to give an idea, Gini coefficient above 0.6 means really high inequality when you are doing these international comparisons across different countries. In the specific case of Goiânia, Iris Rezende Machado, he was the mayor also of Goiânia back in the term of 2005 and 2010. So exactly when this report was published, he was the mayor, and he reacted by saying that the United Nations did not utilize an appropriate methodology, and that actually Goiânia doesn't have slums. So this discussion was done in the media. He gave several interviews about that, and you can check some of this information in this link here. And but I mean, this report didn't really give specific details of how high was the Gini coefficient for Goiânia, for Brasília, and these other cities, but mentioned that they had the highest ones and above 0.6. And then in 2010, 2011, in 2010 more specifically, the UN published this other report about doing the same comparisons of cities across the world. And it showed that among 24 cities analyzed in Latin America and the Caribbean, Goiânia had the highest inequality. This was a report published in 2010. But for Goiânia specifically, they showed a Gini coefficient of 0.65, and this is based on data from 2005, according to the UN. Just remember, again, above 0.6, the Gini coefficient shows really high inequality, and the Gini coefficient varies from 0 to 1. So 0.65 is really high. And again, in 2016, the United Nations published another report. And once again, among 32 cities analyzed in Latin America and the Caribbean, Goiânia had the second highest inequality. But they used pretty much the same data that they used in the previous report, showing a Gini coefficient of 0.65, they also reported in 2005. Because, I mean, this kind of data, they're difficult to collect, so they pretty much were trying to compare different cities across the world, but for Goiânia specifically, they used the same information from 2005. And Goiânia was behind only of Brasília and Curitiba. So Brasília and Curitiba had the highest inequality, with Gini coefficients equals to 0.67, and this is based on 2009 data. And then considering all other 153 cities that were analyzed in this report, covering 74 countries, only 9 cities in South Africa had higher inequality than Goiânia. And these 9 cities in South Africa, they had Gini coefficients ranging from 0.67 and 0.75. And that's also from data from 2005. So this is just to show that how the inequality in Goiânia was really high compared to all these different cities across the globe. And so only these 9 cities in South Africa, Brazil, and Curitiba had higher inequality than Goiânia in this report. And again, Iris Rezende Machado, he reacted to that report. So in July 2016, in one of his letters, announced that he was going to end his political career, he wrote that Goiânia doesn't coexist with slums. And here I'm just translating what he said in Portuguese. And he also mentioned that Goiânia is the only one that doesn't coexist with a lack of treated water. So he was pretty much saying, oh, Goiânia doesn't have slums. We don't have slums like Rio, like Sao Paulo, and we have treated water for pretty much all the population. So Goiânia doesn't have problems of inequality. And although he mentioned that he was going to end his political career, at the end of 2016, he ran again for mayor and was elected. And he's, of course, everybody here knows, he has been the mayor since 2017. So what about the slums in Goiânia? So if we look at the 2010 Brazilian census, Goiânia had 423,297 occupied households. Out of all these households, only 0.25% of them, only 1,066 households, were situated in 7 irregular communities. And this term here, irregular communities, I'm just translating the term used by the Brazilian Census Bureau, the IBGE, by the Instituto Brasileiro de Geografia e Estatística, that use the term aglomerados subnormais in order to pretty much classify what we usually call slums, or the term in Portuguese, favelas. So pretty much the 2010 census for the case of the municipality in Goiânia was saying that we had only 7 of those communities, and these 7 communities had only a little bit more than 1,000 households. And going to the point what the mayor said, actually around 93% of these households had a regular water supply, so it had a treated water. So these overall data go in connection with exactly what the mayor said. Really, in this case, we still have slums, but not as many as other cities, and a really high proportion of households with treated water. The problem is that studies that utilize these global indicators do not allow us to understand complex spatial inequalities within a metropolitan area. So these major global indicators, they don't allow us to go more in-depth into the situation of different metropolitan areas and to the specific case of the metropolitan region of Goiânia. So how is it possible that Goiânia is one of the most unequal cities in the world, does not have slums, or has only those 7 irregular communities, only the 7 favelas, provides adequate public infrastructure and provides adequate public infrastructure to its population, as we saw with the 93% of treated water to the households in Goiânia. The issue is that Goiânia is not an isolated municipality. It is integrated with neighboring municipalities in the metropolitan region. We cannot just look at the municipality of Goiânia and look at these aggregated indicators and say that there is no inequality, there is no problem of poverty or anything like that. And also, slums are not the only segregated spaces. We have to look at all the indicators. We need to analyze several indicators and variations within the metropolitan region to better understand this process of inequality and segregation in the region. And when we look at how the population in the metropolitan region of Goiânia increased. So it increased from a little above 70,000 in 1950 and to 2.1 million in 2010, according to the 2010 census. Like more recent data now, we have that the metropolitan region of Goiânia has around 2.6 million people. So it increased a lot in these last decades. But the proportion of the population that was living in the municipality of Goiânia dropped from 75.5% back in 1950 to a little below 60% in 2010. And the proportion of these people here, the population in the metropolitan region of Goiânia that were living in the other municipalities of the metropolitan region increased from 24.5% to 40%. So when you are trying to understand inequality in Goiânia, it's not appropriate to just look at the population in the municipality of Goiânia. You have to also look at the population in the other municipalities of the metropolitan region of Goiânia, and the whole metropolitan region of Goiânia has a total of 20 municipalities. And now we have this big population, but it's kind of spread around all these 20 municipalities. So we have to look at everybody. Okay, just here, this vertical left axis here is for the percentages, and the right one is for the total population here. And I just tried to combine all this information in the same graph. So for the following analysis that I'm going to present, I focus on the 2010 Brazilian demographic census. I did not look at the other data from previous censuses. That's something that can be done for other censuses. But the 2010 census already provides a lot of information, and which provides a lot of information related to inequality. And it provides this aggregated data by 2,889 census tracts within the metropolitan region of Goiânia. So it provides a lot of variation within the metropolitan region. And there are different indicators that we can analyze, and we looked at all these different indicators using this database. But we focus on these ones here. We look at the spatial distribution of socioeconomic indicators throughout all these census tracts, and we look at household income per capita, education, and education in this case, looking at the percentage of the population that's literate, the percentage of the population that knows how to read and write, color and race, in this case, the percentage of the population that self-identifies as being white, the percentage of households with regular water supply, percentage of households with daily garbage collection service, and percentage of households with regular sewer system. So we will look at these specific indicators here. And which methods we use? We use methods to characterize spatial segregation patterns. And usually, like in the analysis of spatial association, we recognize that people are not randomly distributed across the space. Rich people they don't have the same chance to live in any place of the metropolitan region of Goiânia. Poor people they don't have the same chance to live in the same regions, the same areas of the metropolitan region of Goiânia. People, they segregate in specific areas because houses are expensive, you don't have money to pay a rent or to buy a house in a more wealthy neighborhood, for example. So people are not randomly distributed. People are segregated in specific areas depending on their socioeconomic characteristics and also demographic characteristics. And what's important in this spatial association analysis is that we take into account that neighboring areas, they tend to be more similar to each other than areas situated at a greater distance. So we do look at this almost 3,000 census tracts in the metropolitan region of Goiânia, but we just don't look at each one of them separated. we kind of compare them to other areas surrounding themselves. And one indicator that we can use is called Moran's I. So Moran's I the Moran's I statistic is the most commonly used indicator of global spatial autocorrelation, and it was developed by Professor Lou Cancelin. So sorry, it was not developed by Professor Lou Cancelin. This is the paper that he mentioned that I got this information from. He developed the next one that I'm going to talk about. And Moran's I is the result of comparison between a specific spatial variable and its corresponding spatially lagged variables. What does it mean, spatially lagged variable? A lagged variable, when we are doing spatial analysis, is the characteristic of the neighboring census tracts for each one of the analyzed census tracts that we have in our analysis. So, for the metropolitan region of Goiânia, we have almost 3,000 census tracts. And for each one of the census tracts, we compare them to their neighboring census tracts around its borders. And exactly by looking at the neighboring census tracts around each one of those, by doing this analysis of neighboring areas, that's what we are mentioned that we have this spatially lagged variable. Spatial lagged variable in this case here means that we are looking at the information of the neighboring census tracts of each one of the census tracts that we have in our analysis. In our specific case, what are neighboring areas? Neighboring areas are defined as all areas sharing a border with this queen contiguity. It's pretty much like if you play chess, you know that the queen can move in all different directions. So for each one of the census tracts, we just look at all the neighbors of that census tract, but we could use the information of distance. We could have some other criteria. For this specific case here, we are saying all census tracts that share a border with that specific census tracts are neighbors. That's our criteria. And how is the analysis in terms of hypothesis testing do? Whether we can say that there is a distribution of the population that's not done randomly. The Moran's I is based on the null hypothesis of spatial randomness. So each value is equally likely to occur at any location. So let's say that rich people in the metropolitan region of Goiânia, they were as likely to be located in any of the areas in Goiânia, in the metropolitan region of Goiânia. If they were, then this population would be randomly distributed, and we would not reject our null hypothesis that this population has a random distribution in terms of income. And this indicator tests if people in households with specific characteristics are randomly distributed throughout the census tracts of the metropolitan region of Goiânia or not. If people in households with specific characteristics, if poor people or rich people or middle-class people are concentrated in certain census tracts, the null hypothesis of spatial randomness is rejected. So if we have a p-value of less than 0.05, we say we reject the null hypothesis, and we say that people are not randomly distributed. There is a pattern of segregation. That's what we would be saying, right? But we can go even a little deeper. The Moran's I, it's one measure that gives like just one number for the whole metropolitan region in 1 year and for one indicator. And then Professor Lou Cancelin, he proposed this local indicator of spatial association, LISA, that identify spatial clusters and spatial outliers within a specific area, within a specific region. LISA allows for the composition of global indicators into the contribution of each individual area. The Moran's I gives just one number for the whole metropolitan region of Goiânia. LISA provides one number for each one of the census tracts. And we estimated LISA with a software called Geoda, and it's available for free to download from this website, exactly from the institution where Professor Lou Cancelin works. And then afterwards, I just formatted the maps on QGIS, which is also a free software that you can download from this website. So LISA classifies areas considering information about indicators of the surrounding areas. Just to be more specific, it has these different classifications of areas. It classifies areas as being social clusters, spatial clusters, or spatial outliers. So let's say a specific census tract. If you have a specific census tract with high levels for a specific indicator, let's say that the census tract has a high level of income, of average income, and that census tract is surrounded by other census tracts with high levels of income, that census tract will be classified as being high. So it's a cluster of census tracts with high levels of income. If I have the other case, areas with low levels for specific indicators surrounded by areas with low levels, those areas will be classified as low. That's what the LISA analysis does for us. And in this case here, saying I have an area that has high levels for indicators surrounded by high, so it's high, and low surrounded by low, so it's low, and those then are clusters. But I can have something else, what are called spatial outliers. I might have one area that has high levels for a specific indicator, for example, a census tract with high levels of income, surrounded by areas with low levels of income. So it's called outlier because this area here in the middle is different than the other ones surrounding it. And this specific group is classified as being high-low. And areas with low, and you have another outlier that are areas with low levels of a specific indicator surrounded by areas with high levels for that indicator, and they're classified as being low-high. And these colors, red, this is supposed to be dark blue, pink, and light blue. These are the standard colors that is usually used in this methodology that Cheoda provides and other people usually use as well. So this is the composition of the metropolitan region of Goiânia. Right now, since 2010, we have 20 municipalities in the metropolitan region of Goiânia. Bela Vista de Goiás entered the metropolitan region in 2004, Guapo in 2005, and then these other ones here in dark green, they entered the metropolitan region in 2010. So now, this is the area that I'm going to talk about. But I'm not going to look at the municipality of Goiânia and getting one indicator for the whole area here. We're going to subdivide them as well as all the other municipalities in the metropolitan region by the census tracts. So just to show you this subdivision, that's how it's going to be. So we have these 2,889 census tracts within the 20 municipalities. And here we have the same subdivisions for the municipality, and the minor ones are the census tract. And you see that census tracts exactly because the municipality of Goiânia and also the municipality of Aparecida de Goiânia, the population is much higher than in these other places. The census tracts, they are smaller in terms of geographical space, but the population is big in those areas. But just to show that you have many more census tracts in Goiânia and in Aparecida de Goiânia compared to other municipalities in the metropolitan region. And in the following maps that I'm going to use, I'm not going to put all these borders here around each one of the census tracts because it would be really hard to visualize the data. But I wanted to show this raw data, this raw map here, so you can see what we are talking about. What are these subdivisions of the metropolitan region? So first map, this is household income per capita, and this is data from 2010. From all this data that I'm going to be showing here is from the 2010 Brazilian demographic census. And this is classified in these 5 quintiles. So we have the same number of census tracts within each one of these categories here. So we have 20% of the census tracts here, 20, 20, 20, and 20. And you see that areas that have more the lighter shade of green, they tend to be more surrounding, but also here in Aparecida de Goiânia, you see a lot of like low levels of income, and you see in other municipalities as well. But when you look at this map, I mean, of course, it's hard to understand a specific pattern when you have so many subunits here. But you kind of see that it's not just rich areas in the middle surrounded by poor. Because here you have an area with a little higher level of income. And this one here, higher level of income, and then here lower, and then a kind of mid level of income and lower level of income. So it's more complex. But when we have a map like that, that is so hard to distinguish what is going on, that's when the analysis of the local indicator of spatial association is important for us. So the same map here, we used Lisa, we estimated Lisa for this map here, and this is the result. So I mentioned to you that Lisa classifies into clusters and outliers. So areas that have, in this case here, high levels of household income per capita in 2010 for the metropolitan region of Goiânia, they are shaded here in red, and they are surrounded by areas with high levels of income per capita. Areas with low levels of household income per capita surrounded by low are the dark blue. These light blue here, they are areas with low levels of income surrounded by high. So this one here has low levels of income and has these other ones here that are high. And this one is actually the opposite. The one in pink here is an area with high level of income surrounded by areas with low levels of income, right? And what are these other white areas here? These areas here do not have actually statistically significant results. So they're all blank. They are not classified as a cluster or as an outlier, because in these areas here, pretty much what the analysis is doing is kind of saying, actually you have rich and poor people distributed kind of randomly, or it doesn't, it's not in a way that's not statistically significant. We still think that they are not so segregated in those areas here. They are in white as in these other areas. So the areas in white actually are important for us, because they are saying that in those areas here, you don't see as much segregation as you see, for example, here in red, and all in this region, in these areas here in dark blue. So see that Lisa gives us information for each one of the census tracts, whether they are clusters, outliers, or not significant. But also, we have the Moranzai, and that's what I mentioned before. The Moranzai is this global indicator, and Moranzai gives this one measure for the whole metropolitan region for that specific indicator in that specific year. And the result is 0.73 with a p-value or a pseudo p-value lower than 0.05. So it's pretty much saying, yeah, we reject the null hypothesis that these households are randomly distributed in the metropolitan region based on their income. There is segregation. But if you look at this number here, 0.73, you don't know where is that segregation. You don't know where it is. So that's why Lisa provides a better information, because it shows us where you have households with low levels of income and where you see households with high levels of income. And for the literate population, for all these maps with percentage, I'm classifying them, I have the same ranges here. So it's supposed to go from 0 to 20, 20 to 40%, 40 to 60, and so on. And of course, there is no census tract in the metropolitan region of Goiânia that has 0% of people who are literate. So it starts from 14.05. Of course, this map here is not informative. I could have broken it down by other brackets here. But because I want to use the same kind of classification for all the other indicators, that's why I use the similar subdivisions here. up to 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100. But when you look at this map, of course, I could have like broken it down by other percentage, but I want to compare to the other ones. That's why I use this. But when you look at this, it's not informative at all. You just think, yeah, there is no problem of illiteracy. Pretty much the whole population can read or write, right? So, but when we look at this map and we do the same analysis as we did for income and do the LISA, that's what we get. You say, oh, yeah, these areas here in the municipality of Goiânia, within the municipality of Goiânia, have much higher percentage of people who are literate, who know how to read and write. And all these other areas here in blue, they have, the dark blue, they have lower percentage of people who are literate, surrounded by low. And then you have the outliers as well, low, surrounded by high, the light blue here, and the pink, the ones that have high levels of literacy and surrounded by low. And again, you have some areas that people are kind of like randomly distributed. There is not such a clear segregation pattern in terms of literacy. And for the percentage white, also remember the map for literacy. Now here for the map for color race, we use the same brackets, up to 20, 40, 60, 80, and supposed to be 100, but also we don't have any census tract in the metropolitan region of Goiânia in 2010 with 100% of self-identified white people. So I use the same brackets in order to compare these two maps, but then you see that you see a little bit more variation here. But in the same case of income, it's so much stuff going on that Lisa kind of summarizes this information for us. And it shows, again, that more central areas within the municipality of Goiânia have high percentages of white population. And you also see in these other census tracts here as well, and also up north. And areas with low levels of, or low percentages of people who self-identify as being white are in dark blue. Right, the Moranzai, again, is significant, but it doesn't give much information. Lisa gives us much better information about it. The pink, areas that have higher percentage of people who self-identify as being white, surrounded by areas with low levels, okay? What about the regular water supply? That was something that the mayor mentioned. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, he mentioned that in the municipality of Goiânia, everybody has regular water supply, and that's not true, because not all of them have 100%. So you also see variation within the municipality of Goiânia. But look, you also see a lot of variation in the other municipalities. Of course, some of these areas here, they don't have households. That's why the information is blank. And it's more like rural areas, and you don't have households in those portions. And the city itself, like in Bela Vista, Goiás, the city itself, it's here. And so that's why you see these different patterns. But it's important for us to also look at Lisa to see that in areas that actually people are located, here, do we see a higher percentage of people that have regular water supply compared to other areas? And then with the Lisa, that's what we see, is that you have also high concentration of households in percentage terms with a regular water supply within the municipality of Goiânia. You have all these clusters of high, and all these clusters here with low. And then you see some exceptions within these areas here that probably are exactly the downtown of those cities in each one of these municipalities. So the municipality here, of course, has a lot of like farms and some areas that don't have as many people. And of course, they won't have a regular water supply. It's going to be water coming from the ground. But it still gives us an idea of all this variation. Okay, but we have to be careful. Of course, we have to be careful because we have to understand that these areas here would not be able for the public, for the government to have regular water supply, because those are really kind of remote areas in order to have all the system provided. So we have to be careful even when we use this methodology, because we have to understand what is within those municipalities. And then the indicator about households with their daily garbage collection service, high percentage in the municipality of Goiânia and also in Aparecida de Goiânia, and in other census tracts as well. You see that, and really low levels in other areas, right? And when you look at the LISA, you see that actually in the statistical analysis, really few areas within the municipality of Goiânia have clusters of high in terms of daily garbage collection service. And all these areas here, they do not have it. And you have some outliers as well, areas with high levels of garbage collection service surrounded by low, okay? And for households with regular sewer system, you have a huge concentration of higher percentages within the municipality of Goiânia. And when you do the analysis for LISA, you again see clusters of high around Goiânia, within Goiânia, and low in the other municipalities, and also even within the municipality of Goiânia, but also in the other municipalities of the metropolitan region. Yeah, all these different maps, all these different indicators, it's difficult to understand exactly what's going on. So we try to summarize all this information. And the way that we try to summarize all these different maps and everything is we developed a critical approach to illustrate the spatial structure of segregation in the metropolitan region. So the intention here was to take advantage of the quantitative analysis that I just showed you and provide a deeper interpretative summary of the region. For example, that map for the regular water supply, showing all those low clusters, because those are more rural areas, so that's not really informative. And so we also, even with LISA, we have to be careful how we interpret it. So we try to summarize everything in one single diagram, and that's the result here. So we kind of like started from our LISA maps, and then we start to look at which areas had more concentration, and that's how we came up with. It's pretty much the metropolitan region of Goiânia in this diagram, and we have pretty much 3 rings. This first gray ring here, this bigger blue ring, and then this other ring here that's more in the southern parts of the metropolitan region. Let's just explain it a little bit. So the first ring, this ring that has all this deformed shape, this first ring here, the first gray ring. It's a stable area with various income levels and lower levels of segregation. So the census tracts within this gray area here, this gray here is kind of symbolizing the white from the LISA maps. Those are areas that are not statistically significant. They have households with different characteristics. Right? The characteristics of the people are different and kind of like more randomly distributed. So lower levels of segregation and various income levels, because people are more distributed, if not equally, a little bit more randomly. And within that first ring, you have rich areas in the center, which are the areas in red here. And that's the case of the municipality of Goiânia, within municipality of Goiânia. And that's those neighborhoods more in the center of Goiânia. But you also have some other areas around it that have also higher levels of income and all these other indicators that we looked at. And you also have here this area in the north within the municipality of Santo Antônio de Goiás, and also this area in the south within the municipality of Hidrolândia that also have high levels of income, and they tend to be more richer areas. And you also have within this first ring, these blue circles here, like in the northeast and east of there, in the northeast and then east here, which we call them the poor satellites surrounding rich areas. They are kind of surrounding these rich areas. They are pretty much kind of like areas that are poor, are surrounding these rich areas. And these people here probably are the ones going to these areas to provide service, to work there, to work in the even domestic workers, to work in the service industry within these municipalities. So these people here, what the analysis suggests is that the rich areas need the labor supply of people with lower socioeconomic status, exactly to work for them as cheap labor. That's the whole inequality, poverty story of Brazil. And that's showing here in this diagram, right? That's bad, that's really bad. And that's the thing, we have to recognize the problem and we have to see where the problem is. The second ring. The second ring is this large poor area, farther away from central areas, the second blue ring here. And within the second blue ring that have low income and higher levels of poverty and lower levels of literacy and lower levels of infrastructure in terms of water supply, sewer system, and everything. Within those areas here, we have also these gray circles. The gray circles, again, linking to the LISA approach, are the areas that kind of like a little bit more randomly distribution of the households and people, right? So they are not significant. These are these peripheric centers within the large poor area. So probably they are the downtown of the municipalities within the downtown of the municipalities surrounding the municipality of Goiânia. So these areas have various income levels and lower levels of segregation, okay? And finally, the third ring is another stable area with various levels of income and lower levels of segregation. That's the third ring here that we did in the south and southeast. And more randomly distributed people of different characteristics. But you also have some areas with poor indicators of low socioeconomic status. So these are poor areas in the southeast, and they are located in Hidrolândia and Bela Vista. And this one here in Hidrolândia kind of shows that's a rich area, that's a gated community surrounded by poor people that they supply their labor to this community, right, to this gated community. So that's how we try to summarize all these maps into this diagram, kind of taking advantage of the quantitative approach, but going a little deeper in a more interpretative approach. So, final considerations. The main results indicate that the metropolitan region of Goiânia does not have a simple centrality or a multi-centrality. It's complicated, but that's why it's good, right? So it's good in the sense that we have to spend more time and try to understand. It's bad because it's inequality, it's poverty. But the idea is to spend our time to understand it and to provide guidance to policymakers to implement policies that would improve the lives of those people. There are a series of concentric rings with different types of centralities. These areas function in an integrated and segregated system. It's segregated because you have the poor areas, you have the rich areas, and you also have those areas that are a little bit like with lower levels of segregation. These areas are segregated, are separated, but in our daily life, they are integrated. The areas with more rich households, they need people from the poor households to provide their labor, to work for them, right? So it's integrated in that sense. They are segregated, they live separated, but in our daily life, everybody's kind of merging together, working for the poor person has to work for the rich person to make really little money and so on. And this really complex system cannot be summarized by global measures of inequality, such as the Gini coefficient that the United Nations use in their report, or global measures of spatial distribution, such as the Moranzai. I put the Moranzai for each one of those LISA maps, but they're not so informative as the LISA clusters and outliers. And of course, the United Nations used the Gini because the idea of the United Nations is to give this overview of inequality in the world. They are comparing all these hundreds of cities across the world, and they have to come up with this summary measure, so it's understandable. But this complex system cannot also be understood by only analyzing the municipality of Goiânia, such as the current mayor did. We cannot just look at the municipality of Goiânia. First, everything that he said was wrong, that the municipality of Goiânia has everything good. And by just analyzing the municipality of Goiânia, it shows that you're missing the point as a good policy maker, as someone that's in charge of the government, because you have to look at this complex system. But even within the municipality of Goiânia, there is a lot of inequality, as we saw in those maps. A lot of variation within the municipality of Goiânia. So the analysis is wrong by saying that there is no poverty, and the analysis is also wrong by not understanding that it's not just about the municipality of Goiânia, it's about the metropolitan region of Goiânia. You have to take into account at least all these 20 municipalities together. Cool? So this is just the start, and I mean the possibility of getting in touch with Professor Camilo Amaral is important, and with all the students that are interested to do this, to go further in this kind of studies, is that we can create some partnerships for the future, right? We can create some partnerships for the future. There is a lot of data. I looked here at data only from the 2010 census. I mean, we have, like I showed you, data, the aggregated one from 1950, but this more spatially rich data, it comes from, we have from 1991, 2000, 2010. And I mean, the census, the 2020 census was delayed because of the pandemic. Let's hope that's actually going to happen next year. And with that, the census, we'll be able to even do that analysis for the current situation. So possibilities for future research, we want to provide an analysis of spatial segregation patterns over time, taking advantage of these older census, 1991, 2000, 2010, and the upcoming 2021 census, to better understand changes in the urban space. These metropolitan regions, there is so much movement. The metropolitan region still attracts a lot of migrants from other areas within the state of Goiás, and also from other states. So there is migration to the metropolitan region of Goiânia from other states, from other municipalities within Goiás, and from municipalities within the metropolitan region of Goiânia, and also people moving around it from all these municipalities, all these different migration flows. So it's important to investigate this relationship between migration flows and public policies to actually see how we can deal with issues of increasing levels of segregation. And the idea is to continue with an interdisciplinary approach, because these studies are essential to develop a well-informed urban planning policies to deal with issues of spatial segregation. So we go more in depth on this analysis. Great. So this one possibility for going further on these studies is to estimate spatial models. For each one of these maps that I showed you here with Lisa, I'm analyzing for 1 year, one variable, the distribution of that variable across all these almost 3,000 census tracts. But it's one variable. Spatial models, they can estimate multivariate models. What are these multivariate models? They pretty much can verify the association of several independent variables with a specific dependent variable. We can see, for example, whether age, education, color, race, occupation, migration, and fertility are associated with income. So we can put all these variables together in the same analysis in this multivariate model. Multivariate because we have more than 2 variables at a time being analyzed. We have several independent variables to see the association with a specific dependent variable. And the good thing about the spatial models is that they deal with spatial dependence by measuring the influence of neighboring areas for several variables at the same time. Like we talk about the spatial lagged variables, right? In our LISA maps, taking into account the information of neighboring areas. The spatial models do the same thing, but instead of looking at one variable at a time, they take into account all these variables here together. And that can be done, and that has not been done for the metropolitan region of Goiânia. So this is a great topic for a master thesis, for a dissertation, a PhD dissertation. And these models that take into account all this neighboring area information, all variables at the same time, they are called spatial autoregressive models. Autoregressive because you're taking information from areas around it and doing the regression into the specific metropolitan area that you're analyzing. And the same Professor Lucan Celine, and also this in this book here by Professor James Lesage, he also has some more specific models. And the references that I used here for this presentation are here in this last slide. To go more in detail on what I just presented, you can go to this website here. The data, I got it for free from IBGE, from the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics. And the reports from the UN that I showed at the beginning, they're all available in these links. And this book here by Professor Lesage is available for free to download, so you can just Google it and download it. Okay. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present here. And yeah, I will be glad for the discussion and answer questions that you might have or suggestions.
Nice. Thank you very much for the presentation. I think it's very amazing how it shows the importance of spatializing the data, which is something that we, from the perspective of architecture and the urbanism, are very keen to think about also, so we can visualize how those things are working within a system. And I think all these analyses that you are developing help a lot to understand this system behind and how these areas are relating one to the other. So I think it also leads to thinking on how these things also helps to reproduce the conditions of people. So if they are like born or live in a region, they have also different access to services and to opportunities. So this ends up like reproducing the conditions that they have for their life. And I think it helped to show like these relations of these satellites around these really rich areas that have those poor areas around. I have a question that I can make later, but now there is Professor Diego Tarley from the IESA at the UFG. He's from the Institute of Social Environment Studies, and he asked for you about the indices of Moran and Lisa. They are good to make a picture of the variation of socioeconomic data, but they are more about the but they maybe don't show so much the temporal dynamics among different census. So in this case, a good resource he suggests could be like a pattern mining, which is on ArcGIS, that shows the hotspots where there is less or more increasing on inequalities. So he would like to know if you have developed research on this idea of the temporal dynamic of inequalities, or if you could mention some colleagues of you. So that was Professor Diego Tarley.
No, yeah, thank you for the question. I mean, no, I have not. I have not done analysis looking at changes over time, and that's what I mentioned in that last slide about possibilities of future research. So it would be great to keep in touch with you. I agree. I mean, the Lisa and Moranzai, they're not able to capture these changes over time. And I was not thinking about the space-time pattern mining as you suggested. I was thinking more in terms of spatial models, the one that I mentioned in the presentation. I was thinking about the statistical models that you would have all the variables being implemented together, and you could also include time. So you could have the different censuses, and I mean, you can go back to other censuses, but the 1991 census, the one that start being more like rich in terms of analysis data for specific areas. So 1991, 2000, 2010, that would be already a lot of data. And you could, in these spatial models, time would be possible to include in the analysis, right? So and those two references by those papers, the Professor Lucas Salini, I think was 2004, and Lesage 2009. Lesage, he proposes a model, kind of like a spatial econometrics model that takes into account the neighboring areas, but it still has time. And that's actually my goal in my research for these next years, not just about Goiânia, but about other areas as well. And I was actually thinking about doing it for migration within the United States using the spatial models, but that can be done to Goiânia. So my suggestion would be to look at those references that I mentioned. They are methodological references, not about Goiânia, but they would give you an idea of models that you could estimate, that it would take into account series of variables at the same time and time. Yeah, so that's my suggestion, but I would be glad to talk more if you want afterwards by email.
Okay, well, we have also commentary from Sara Chiodi. She's a research fellow at Polytechnic of Milan, and she's thanking for your speech, and that she's also engaged in the topic that you suggested, because she's working on social justice and metropolitan planning. So your lecture is also very interesting for my studies, and I would like to share more information about that. And she would like to ask just two brief questions. Like one, it is not clear to me, did you cross the various data you collected? I mean, I got, for example, that looking to income, there is a specific spatial segregation that Gini or Maran 1 indicators cannot show, but how it is related with the other variables you observed actually seems to be in future research proposals. And the second question, which are the consequences of your studies for the policy making? I mean, did you think about some suggestions on it? Today, she was a little missing this point.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Sarah. I mean, yeah, I did not look at the correlations between the variables. So the local indicator of spatial association, you can look at the distribution in the space, one variable at a time. It's one option, one variable at a time on space. And that's what I did. We did like income, color race, literacy, and everything else once at a time. There is the possibility of using, looking at correlations of these variables with what is called, and so what I did was the univariate LISA. Univariate because it's just one variable at a time. there is the bivariate LISA. The bivariate LISA lets you compare the correlation of these two variables, taking into account the space. But I talked to another professor, his name, Professor Corey Sparks from the University of Texas at San Antonio. He teaches a lot of like spatial models. And I asked him about that bivariate LISA, and he said that he doesn't like it as much because you start to look at more variables at a time, so it would be better to already go to spatial models. So those spatial models that I'm suggesting would exactly do what your question is about, and you would look at all these variables at a time. I just jumped a little bit beyond Gini and Moranzai by looking at variations within the metropolitan region. But much more than that can be done. And one of them is the correlation between these variables, which the spatial models would allow you to do. And the bivariate models, the bivariate LISA, would be a step forward, but I would suggest you go a little beyond with the spatial models. And yeah, I mean, I didn't talk about policy implications a lot in my presentation, you know, like there is in that paper that I mentioned at the end of the presentation, we go more in detail about the history of urban planning in the metropolitan region of Goiânia. So the historical aspect I also did not cover today. And in terms of implications, it's really that first one, all these different mayors from these 20 cities should be more engaged to talk to each other. I mean, we all know that in reality, it's not an easy thing to deal with. Another thing that's important is that we have to recognize the inequality within the municipalities. Goiânia has a lot of inequality out there, and it's not being recognized by the city. I don't know exactly how the debate of the candidates for mayor is going on in the city right now, but even I remember back in the 90s or early 2000s, a lot of the conversation among the candidates for mayor were not even talking about inequality, and we have to pretty much recognize that. And the other thing is to also recognize that you have these pockets of poor areas surrounding these rich areas that you should provide more resources to them. So that's really clear in our analysis, which are the areas that have these really high levels of inequality as well. So the interesting thing in terms of policy implications is that for each mayor, we can point out where are the areas and what's the variable that has issues. And in that case, it's really looking at implementing better infrastructure, sewer system, water supply, electricity. Electricity I didn't show today, but we also have a map for that. And even recognizing that there is inequality. I mean, that's a basic thing. I mean, the candidates now, if they're not talking about inequality, they should in the election, right?
So I would also like to make a question also like for the purpose of the event and this integration of the research we do in architecture and the urbanism and at the project and city post-graduation. I would like to know a little bit about the importance of an interdisciplinary approach to understand this, the relations of these variables and the spatial situation they create. And how do you think it's how is this process of treating the data and to move from purely basic quantitative social analysis in order to develop this a critical interpretation of this space? How you think that should operate, or how this operate if one analysis support the others, or if you think it's important to have a working hypothesis, for example? How do you think about that? In this case, maybe there was a previous motivation, right?
Yeah, I mean, your question is like if we can go further in an approach that would not be merely quantitative, right? And trying to link different methods. I think, for example, one of the maps that I was showing, actually was the diagram, the summary diagram. I was mentioning like that there were some spots there that you have like poor areas, the poor satellites, how we call them, the poor satellites surrounding the rich areas, the rich red dots. That's just a hypothesis. I mean, because I mentioned that maybe those are the poor people from these areas here are going to those rich areas to provide their labor. That's all a hypothesis. The census doesn't ask that question. We don't know if those people are going to those areas to work or not. So it would be important to have another survey that you could go to those specific areas, that you would over sample those areas and ask more people in those areas to see, to get the information about where they live, but also to understand where they work, how their life is. And if you want to go deeper, you can go even with a more qualitative approach that you would do in-depth interviews with these people, not just a survey with specific questions, but actually have a more conversation of those people. So I think that would provide even a more interdisciplinary approach to this analysis and a deeper understanding. And so I think that census data is great. There is a lot of data still that can be analyzed. All these different methodologies about correlation between variables, spatial models, and so on. It is possible to do it and has not been done, but that's not going to be enough. In order to better understand the dynamic of the area, would be better to collect more data, more information about the specific communities. And you could, but from this quantitative analysis, you know where to go. You know where to implement the survey or do the in-depth interviews. So the quantitative approach is important to inform the qualitative interview, the qualitative research.
We have
I don't know if I answer your question. So
yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's also like a process of trying to interconnect the interdisciplinary approach, usually full of challenges also. We have another question from Renato Cirino, which was also a teacher in the field of art, and he was asking how to create a cultural change in which citizens can see social inequality. It seems to me that this issue is still in the academy or in other places far from the community.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a great question. I mean, it's when Professor Camilo Amaral mentioned that, like, I worked at the RAND Corporation before my current position. The RAND Corporation is a research institute. They provide all this policy analysis, and their results usually are read and taken into account by the government much faster than work that we do in academia. Just the other day, I was attending a lecture with someone who works in a state agency related to juvenile crime, and she was saying that usually she read a paper. I mean, it's usually what we see, that like usually when we do this analysis of in academia, it takes 6-7 years for anything to go into the public discourse, right? Even climate change, for example, climate change. I mean, when I was in Goiânia in high school, we were talking about that, but just now it's in the international discourse. And but then the same researcher, she was mentioning that the work that she does, pretty much right after the report is done, policymakers already take that into account. That's a huge challenge. I mean, there is not an easy way to do it. The way that I try to do it is to participate in this kind of like forums to spread the word. That's why I have my website, trying to make my work easily available to people. In my classes, I bring the results from this research projects into my students, so they get to know about all these issues. It's not just a textbook, it's like problems right now that we are facing. But also, like, if we have the opportunity and if we are invited to be interviewed by a TV station, or to write a paper in a newspaper, I mean, it would be interesting to write a short paper in one of the local newspapers in Goiânia and kind of summarize that. The challenge for us is to explain this complex methodology in a language that people that are not in academia can understand, and that's it's on us. We have to invest on that. So I think that writing short articles in newspapers, it's a great thing, because then people that usually don't read academic papers, they would have access to that information. Maybe not all the details about the methodology, but the main results. And the other thing is, like, in a time of election like this now, with all these candidates using social media, trying to reach us, we can do the opposite. We can reach them. We can go to those candidates and ask, see, these studies here are showing inequality in Goiânia. There are several studies showing that. How are you going to deal with that? Put them on the spot, right? They are all on social media right now, so we technically can access them, and we have the links of the studies. So make them read it, pressure them, right? So that's our role as citizens. So I think there are different strategies, right? So I think, but that's a great challenge that we have in academia.
So yes, I think we reached the final of our first event in the forum. I would like to thank you again, Professor Ernesto, for sharing with us your research and like being open for new new work together with us and other professors at the university. And I would also like to thank everybody that stayed up until now, and for those that will be watching later also in the record. And please remember that this event is also a part of a series, so we have many other events. I will talk a little bit about the other events, but first I would like to ask if you want to do some final considerations for the lecture.
No, yeah, I think, thank you everybody for all the comments. I really appreciate the feedback. I think the questions were great. And if you have more questions, just email me and we can keep talking. We can also schedule Zoom meetings to talk in person if that's easier than writing emails. I really think that a lot of work can be done about Goiânia, about the metropolitan region of Goiânia, with the data that already is out there. But if we are able to collect more data, even better, and in a mixed method approach would be really interesting, as Professor Camilo Amaral suggested. And I think that the challenge that Renato Cirino brought, I mean, how do we talk to people outside of academia? It's something that I think every day. So it's like, how do we are heard by other people? And again, I mean, an easy way to do is social media. Instead of just fighting on social media, do more debate in social media with your candidates, with the candidates for mayor out loud, you know, put pressure. And only by that way, science will in some way make a difference to improve people's lives. But thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I really like the opportunity to talk to UFG crowd and to all the people who participate and make comments. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
And thank you very much for returning home and giving us a lecture, and I hope we keep in touch. We call egressos. It's also a policy of us to keep in touch with our alumni. So I would like just to show a little bit the program of the forum. So we have on Friday at 10 a.m. in Brazil, like a lecture called Branded Heritage, which in Portuguese we call it Patrimônio Marcado, from Michela Paci. She's from the UAV University of Venice in Italy, and she will discuss, she has just published a book about the production of heritage together with a professor from London, Alan Chandler, which is a very dense and critical theory, especially interested in especially important for those who want to think about architecture in cities, how they engender process, and also how the process of heritage is also connected today with what we can call like a society of spectacle, and she has this research in the whole in different places in the world, like across continents. We also will have like a lecture from UCL, from Camilo Boano, which is very interesting too, and he's from UCL at the Bartlett School, and it's as we are very used now in Brazil about the state of exception. He's asking about this urbanism of exception that we maybe we are living now, and he's working with Agamben's theory. And there is also from Douglas Spencer from Iowa University in the US, and it's about the dialectics of nature and capital, subjects of the eco-imaginary. So he's researching on how subjectivities are being produced and reproduced, and the role today of like the ideas we have on nature and the sustainability, and how this engenders also a perspective, a sociological perspective, which is really critical and very interesting. And then later we're going to have on the 25 Professor Valeria Lingua from Firenze, from Florence, and from the University of Florence, and she will show the work of her laboratory, which is about regional design. So it's like mixing techniques of design and planning to create a transformative approach to planning, how planning can help us in the ecological transition. And the 27, Professor Angioletta from the Polytechnic of Turin, should be speaking about landscape design methods, experimentations along rivers. So also how rivers are connected to city, and how techniques of design can help thinking and visualizing situations, and envisioning better futures, also discussing a little bit of utopia in the cities, and etc. So this is the folder for the next lecture, and but we have these other lectures also, and we will keep everybody informed on the website and on the medias. So thank you again, Professor Ernesto, everybody that helped and everybody that joins us, and we see everybody in the next event.
Thank you.